Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Russia threatens to take military countermeasures if the West boosts its military footprint in Greenland. This comes as several European countries send small contingents of troops to Greenland after Trump's takeover threat. The EU Parliament approves an over $107 billion loan for Ukraine, providing a financial lifeline to the cash-strapped Kiev 4 years into Russia's invasion. Hundreds of honking tractors roll into Madrid as Spanish farmers stage a protest against the European Union's trade deal with 4 South American countries. Chinese President Xi Jinping makes a rare public reference to the anti-graft probes that have hit the country's top generals. He says that military has grown stronger in the past year in its fight against corruption. And tropical cyclone Gazani slams into Madagascar's eastern coastline, killing at least 20 people in the island nation's second largest city. Hello and welcome. Our top story today is from South Africa. The country is working to get back its nationals trapped in the Ukraine war. Now, these are the people who were lured into fighting for Moscow by fake job offers. Their bait was an opportunity to live a better life, but they ended up digging trenches and dodging bullets on the front lines. And now, to repatriate them, President Cyril Ramaphosa dialed Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two discussed the return of South Africans scammed into joining the war that was never theirs to fight. President Ramaphosa discussed peace and South Africa-Russian cooperation with President Putin. Here is a part of the statement that the South African Presidency had put out after the call.
President Ramaphosa and President Putin pledged their support to the process of returning South Africans fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. In this regard, teams from both sides will continue their engagements towards the finalization of this process.
Now, back in November, the South African government said that they had received distress calls from 17 men trapped in Ukraine's Donbas. They were reportedly tricked into joining mercenary forces. One of the biggest allegations was made against the daughter of South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma. Now, she is among the several people accused of recruiting men to join Russian mercenaries.
They were fooled to fight in a war that's in a European, barbaric, terrible war that Africa has nothing to do with, and it's a colonial war, so seeing Africans fighting a colonial war against a free country is especially insane. And by the way, if it's true that some of South African politicians were involved, then it makes the whole situation even more precarious.
Last year, South Africa warned its citizens not to fall for recruitment scams. Now, these were being popularized by multiple social media influencers. Their campaigns promised young women jobs in Russia and a luxurious lifestyle. But where did they actually end up? In drone factories, right in the epicenter of the fighting, with no protection and no escape. And this is it's not just about South Africa. Now, back in November, Ukraine's foreign minister said that over 1,400 people from 36 African nations were dragged into the Russia-Ukraine war. Reports show that just like South Africans, Kenyans too were deceived into signing up for high-paying jobs in Russia. Some of them reportedly ended up dying on the battlefield or suffering from serious wounds. Now, back in December, Kenyan authorities said that around 200 of its nationals had been sent to fight in Ukraine, but reports suggest that this figure is underestimated. Nairobi has condemned the use of Kenyan recruits as cannon fodder. Next month, Kenya's foreign minister will visit Moscow to discuss the release of those trapped in the war. Nairobi also plans to push for the release of Kenyans held as prisoners of war in Ukraine. Now, authorities said that over the past 2 months, over 30 Kenyans have been evacuated from Russia, and fake recruitment agencies have been shut down in the East African country. Now, several young Africans have been trapped in war that they had nothing to do with, all because they dreamed of a better life and better pay. But their dreams were crushed by the brutal reality of war. The question remains, will they ever return home? Now, for more on this, we have with us Kani Magubane, who is a political analyst joining us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Great to speak to you again, Kani.
A very good evening to you and your viewers as well.
Now, Kani, what does President Ramaphosa's direct engagement with President Putin signal diplomatically? Is this a breakthrough moment, or is this simply the beginning of a long negotiation process?
Well, I think first things first, it has to be made clear that this is a distressing situation, because as much as we know that 17 men had made the distressed call to South Africa to rescue them, but we don't know how many before them were sent to Russia and how many have died in the lines of battle. Now, what this signals is that South Africa is using its position as part of the BRICS nation to negotiate for the return of these South Africans. In earlier reports, we had read that about 14 million rand had been paid for these 17 individuals to go to Russia, and that a ransom was being sought, or a repayment rather was being sought for their return. And these are some of the diplomatic issues that South African officials working with Russian officials are going to have to deal with. However, what is even more glaring and what is even more important is asking, how are these illegal recruitment agencies recruiting on behalf of an official military? Because it's not as if the individuals are going to fight on the sideline. They are fighting with the official Russian military. So the question is, why is the Russian military recruiting Africans to go and fight with them, and why are they using clandestine methods? These are literally non-trained people that are being put in the front lines of fierce battle. And the Russians, I think, need to come clean on this. How were these individuals able to join the official military? Because for all intensive purposes, only Russian soldiers are supposed to be allowed within the confines of that war. But we saw those South Africans, the Kenyans and Zimbabweans as well. Most recently, it's been revealed that Zimbabweans themselves have fallen, along with the many 36 African countries. So the Russian government needs to come clean. Why were these Africans part of the official Russian military?
On that. Right. And given the reports that these people were lured under false pretenses, what legal and diplomatic mechanisms actually exist to secure their release from these Russian-linked mercenary groups?
These are extraordinary circumstances, and I can only speak for South Africa and not so much for the other African countries. For us, definitely, we have our diplomatic missions and we have our diplomatic channels that we have to use, and it's going to take negotiations between Russian officials. And once again, this comes back to my first point. Now we are negotiating on official platforms for something that took place illegally to begin with. So now we need to employ official channels within the diplomatic community for South Africa. South Africa may end up having to pay the money that is being demanded for the release of these South Africans. I do suspect that South Africa will have to pay. I don't think they'll be able to get around it, because the individuals who did secure them paid a high amount. And I think that also we need to look at the involvement of former President Jacob Zuma's daughter, Duduzile Zuma, in terms of how much money did she receive, if she was indeed a part of this. And also last month in January, there were about 4 individuals, including a high-profile journalist that was arrested for these very same recruitment schemes. And so it would seem that it's not just the 17 people who sent out a distressed message, but there were many more that went to Russia that fell beneath the radar that we are not even aware of. I don't think this is the full picture. South Africa can't be fighting so hard only for 17 people. I think there's a lot that's being hidden, and Russia is playing its cards close to its chest and is not really telling the world the truth.
And Kani, with, as you've mentioned, these similar recruitment cases that are emerging from across Africa, what does this reveal in the broader picture about the scale of foreign mercenary recruitment on the continent, and how and why, how vulnerable are these young Africans to these schemes, and why the focus on Africa?
Well, Africa is low-hanging fruit because of the widespread poverty and just how many individuals on the continent are looking for a better life. I'm looking to move to Europe, are looking, to do something better with their lives. And as you mentioned in your intro, most of these fake job recruitments promise a better life. And that is music to many people's ears, including our youth in South Africa. And so on the backdrop of that social vulnerability, it becomes very easy to recruit Africans because most of the Africans that do respond, they are in desperate need of jobs. They're in desperate need of economic relief. And so it makes sense to go where there's low-hanging fruit. And this is where bodies like the African Union need to come in quite strongly. And this is where we need strong messaging across Africa to say these are fake recruitment scams, because they're not using Russians to recruit. They're using other Africans. They're using people that look like me, that sound like me, that even speak my language. And that makes it easier for me to trust those individuals. But what we don't know is that there's other people working and pulling the strings in the background. So Africa is vulnerable, because of the widespread poverty and just the massive need for economic relief.
Absolutely. Kani, as always, great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The United States is expanding its military presence in Nigeria. After launching airstrikes on Christmas Day, Donald Trump is now sending 200 American soldiers to Africa's most populous nation. Officially, it's a training mission, but discussions are reportedly underway for something more, a potential U.S. drone facility on Nigerian soil. A U.S. official confirmed on Tuesday that roughly 200 troops will be deployed to train Nigerian forces battling terrorist groups. They will join a small American advisory team already operating in the country. Until last week, Washington had not publicly confirmed boots on the ground. That changed when the U.S. AFRICOM commander confirmed a small U.S. team was dispatched after a meeting with Nigerian President Tinubu in Rome last year. Now, he described the move as part of growing collaboration between the two nations.
We agreed that we needed to work together on the way forward in the region. That has led to increased collaboration between our nations to include a small U.S. team that brings some unique capabilities from the United States in order to augment what Nigeria has been doing for several years.
Reports suggest the new contingent will operate from a separate base, which could become temporary or long-term. Nigerian authorities say the mission is strictly limited to intelligence and training. They say there is no combat role. The deployment follows U.S. airstrikes in Sokoto State targeting Islamic State-linked terrorists. Trump described the strikes as necessary to stop what he calls a Christian genocide in Nigeria. Abuja has repeatedly rejected those claims. However, security conditions across northern Nigeria remain volatile. Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Province terrorists have intensified attacks on military convoys, villages and religious sites. Now, earlier this month, nearly 200 people were killed in coordinated attacks in western and northern Nigeria. Officials described it as one of the deadliest attacks in recent years. The military cooperation between Washington and Abuja has accelerated alongside the violence. Last month, the United States delivered additional military supplies. The Nigerian Air Force is also reportedly using intelligence from U.S. reconnaissance flights operating in Africa. But the new deployment could mark the beginning of a broader American security footprint in Nigeria. Washington has reportedly requested permission to establish a drone refueling station in Nigeria. Now, if approved, it would support U.S. intelligence and surveillance flights currently operating from Accra in Ghana. The request comes after the United States withdrew from its drone base in Niger in 2024. Nigeria sits in West Africa, and it is strategically central to counter-terror operations across West Africa. Analysts say that a base here would restore the reach that Washington recently lost. For now, 200 American troops are confirmed to be deployed on Nigerian soil. Analysts say it's a limited number, but combined with airstrikes, new military aid, and reported base negotiations, the American footprint is expanding. For Nigeria, the partnership boosts counter-terror capacity. For Washington, it reestablishes strategic depth in West Africa. The question now is simple. Does this stay a training mission or become a permanent American security hub in Nigeria? Our next story is from Senegal. At one of the country's top universities, protests over unpaid scholarships have turned deadly. A medical student has been killed in the clashes. His death has further angered the youth in a country where unpaid financial aid for students has been a burning issue for several years now. Now, the incident occurred on Monday at the Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar. In a shocking video, students were seen falling from a burning building at the university, while burned-out cars and broken barricades littered the campus. This, as tensions between police and student protesters soon escalated into deadly clashes that claimed the life of a second-year medical student, Abdullahi Ba. Now, since then, authorities have suspended classes indefinitely and have closed student housing, forcing thousands of students to leave the university. After Ba's death, both the police and students have shared their own version of what happened during the clashes. One of the student leaders has claimed that Ba did not participate in the protest, yet he was beaten by police in his room.
Because this is a political failure, an economic failure. Because we cannot accept that even today, in the 21st century, students are demanding their scholarships and end up being killed simply for asking for their grants. That is deplorable.
Meanwhile, the government has condoled Ba's death, calling it a tragedy. Authorities have also acknowledged the acts of violence by the security forces.
We need to be clear about this. On the ground, there have been acts of violence on both sides, and acts committed by the defense and security forces. As the highest authority, these are acts that I cannot condone.
Senegal's Interior Minister also said that they had received precise intelligence that certain people were planning to attack campus facilities. He said that authorities found tear gas grenades and weapons during searches of student rooms. Ba's death remains under investigation, and it has once again highlighted Senegal's financial woes and the government's unfulfilled promises to the youth. Since December, students have been clashing with security forces over unpaid financial aid. Students seek full payment of backlogged scholarships. Many of them have reportedly not received aid for 4 to 5 months now. And they have also rejected the government's proposal to pay only the principal amount without arrears. But authorities have rejected students' claims of pending aid.
Since the beginning of the academic year, scholarships have been regularly paid on the 5th of each month. To date, the state does not owe students any scholarship arrears.
Despite repeated protests and clashes, the Senegalese government has praised its public spending on student support and has even said that it was ahead of the US and its neighbors.
I must remind you that this year, the state spent $105 billion on scholarships for the year 2025. For comparison, our Ivorian neighbors are at $39 billion, Benin at $12 billion. This shows that Senegal is a country that spends enormously on social services and study grants.
The latest protests have reflected the wider youth dissatisfaction in Senegal. The deadly clashes are an alarming reminder for a country where 3/4 of the population is under 35. When President Bassirou Diomaye Faye won the 2024 election, he had raised hope for change. The youth believed him. But that belief seems to be fading now. Senegal's public finances are in bad shape. Its debt exceeds $43 billion, or 132% of its GDP. And talks with the International Monetary Fund are stalled owing to a worsening fiscal outlook. And who is bearing the brunt of it all? The youth. While the government continues to praise its efforts, the violent clashes and the death of a young student tell a different story. Now, Africa's largest diamond producer is rethinking its economic strategy. Botswana, long defined by diamonds, is expanding exploration beyond the stone that built its economy. With revenues falling and inventories rising, the government says it will reportedly survey nearly 70% of its unexplored territory, with their focus shifting toward critical minerals. Now, the move follows a sharp downturn in the global diamond market. Now, according to reports, mineral revenues fell to $785 million in the 2025-26 fiscal year, compared to a historical annual average of nearly $2 billion. Now, that represents a decline of roughly 59%. At the same time, Botswana's diamond stockpile has grown. Finance Ministry data shows 12 million carats were sitting in inventory at the end of December 2025. Now, that is nearly double the government's allowable level of 6.5 million carats. Now, officials say that demand has been weighed down by global economic uncertainty and the rapid growth of lab-grown diamonds. Now, Botswana, the country's main diamond producer, says it does not plan to increase output in the current market. In response, Botswana is expanding exploration beyond diamonds. The government says it will expand exploration across the roughly 70% of land that has not yet been surveyed. A newly launched state-owned exploration company will focus on identifying high-value minerals, including copper and other critical resources.
We were doing more exploration looking for diamonds than looking for other high-value minerals, and now we're going to change that. If you've only explored 30% of your country, it really just shows our strong focus on diamonds.
Botswana remains the world's largest diamond producer by value, but officials say that diversifying the mineral base is now a priority. Critical minerals such as copper and cobalt are in rising global demand, and Botswana is already considering an emerging copper mining hotspot. The government says that stronger geological data will help guide investment decisions and determine whether the state should take stakes in future projects. The shift also comes amid growing geopolitical competition over critical minerals. Interest in copper and cobalt has intensified as the United States and China compete for supply chains. Botswana officials say the United States has expressed interest in partnering on exploration and mining projects, though discussions remain at an early stage. Now, this comes as U.S. engagement in Africa's mineral sector has expanded in recent months. Earlier this month, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo held meetings in Washington during a critical minerals ministerial seeking investment tied to Congo's vast mineral reserves. Now, Congo is not the only country drawing that interest. Across Africa, Washington has been increasing engagement with mineral-rich states. Angola, Zambia, Namibia, Tanzania, Mozambique, Guinea, from copper belts to lithium corridors, these partnerships reflect a broader U.S. push to secure access to critical resources. Analysts say that a part of that strategy is aimed at reducing China's dominance in critical mineral supply chains. China's Belt and Road projects have linked mineral-rich regions to ports and export routes, strengthening Beijing's footprint across the continent. And for countries like Botswana, that global competition creates leverage. For now, Botswana is not walking away from diamonds, but with stockpiles rising and revenues under pressure, the government is widening its mineral base. For a nation that has been long defined by diamonds, the next chapter may be written in copper and other critical minerals. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.